what I care about more, though, it's not about whether I agree with this policy or that policy. It's about whether we are actually accurately depicting what people are saying. If we're not doing that, then the whole media cycle is fucked. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. A little while back, Vivek Ramaswamy went on David Pakman's show to debate him, and we reacted. It was a fruitful discussion. There were good ideas shared on both sides, but near the end of the interview, Vivek decided to call out Pakman for being a little bit condescending toward Trump voters and Republicans in general. My suspicion is that this has rubbed David the wrong way, and now he has a little bit of a vendetta out for Vivek, as do much of the progressive commentators on YouTube. Vivek recently went on Shawn Hannity's show, had a little chat about a variety of issues. Hannity was questioning him on his foreign policy stances, and a lot of things were said, and a lot of confusion was generated. Subsequently, David Pakman has provided a reaction and has made it seem as if Vivek lied multiple times throughout the interview or went back on things that he previously said. Now, in the past, I have personally been critical of some of the things that Vivek has said, not only on the debate stage, but on certain topics where he has, in my mind, gone back on certain convictions. I made a video on his stance on Juneteenth. That being said, we're going to take a look at this video that David Pakman has posted and respond to some of the accusations that are being levied.
Took place last night. This is really something. I think you're going to enjoy this. Vivek Ramaswamy appeared on Fox News with propagandist Shawn Hannity. Now, Shawn Hannity makes Vivek look quite bad. But the remarkable thing about this is that Hannity is doing this not in bad faith, but he's doing this cynically. Hannity wants to help Trump. Hannity is buddy-buddy with Trump. So everything I'm about to show you here is Shawn Hannity trying to help Donald Trump. That all being said, Hannity pretty astutely points out the erratic and contradictory nature of just about everything Vivek Ramaswamy says. First and foremost, here is Vivek Ramaswamy saying, once we get our semiconductors under control, then we bail on Taiwan. And Hannity goes, did you just say that? And Vivek...
Okay, and I want you to listen to what David just described Vivek's position to be, that once we achieve semiconductor independence, that we will bail on Taiwan. And then I want you to compare that to what Vivek actually says, because it's a little bit tricky here.
Vivek goes, no, I didn't say it. And Hannity goes, you did. You just said it. Check this out.
So I'm the only presidential candidate in either party who has had the courage to say that I'm not going to embrace the one China policy, which is the posture of both political parties today. That I'm not going to just adopt strategic ambiguity. We can't afford that. We need to be clear that we will defend Taiwan. That's different from strategic ambiguity now.
A lot to break down in this first little bit, but we have a couple of key elements that we have to look at. Vivek is bringing up the US's current posturing on the China-Taiwan conflict, being a one China policy, which would mean that Taiwan would not be independent from China. Now, how are they affirming this one China policy? They're doing it through something called strategic ambiguity. The stance that the US is taking is two-pronged. It's number one, that we are in support of a one China policy. Prong two is strategic ambiguity toward the region. Now, what exactly does that mean? Because it's sort of a complex, jargony word. It means that the US would keep its intended response toward the actors of the region, you might have guessed, ambiguous. The idea is you're keeping all of the players in the region on their toes as to not reveal what your intervention would be, depending on the circumstance. Notice that within strategic ambiguity, it is not fair to say that the US is taking a position against Taiwan or a position for Taiwan. It is merely a position of ambiguity. It's sort of like Schrodinger's cat. We technically don't know until actors in the region do something that results in US response. Let's listen to Vivek continue here.
We have to defend Taiwan until we achieve semiconductor independence, at which point
we're going to move towards support of Taiwan with the condition until we achieve semiconductor independence. So currently, we don't support Taiwan. We have this position of supporting a one China policy and strategic ambiguity. But if I am president, we will change our stance toward the region and start conditionally supporting Taiwan until we achieve semiconductor independence. Let's listen to Vivek finish
We resume
the
our current posture of strategic ambiguity, which is exactly what the U.S. adopts today.
And we will return to our current posture of strategic ambiguity. So even though we've now achieved semiconductor independence and that quote-unquote conditional support of the region has gone away and we've returned to strategic ambiguity, that doesn't take away the fact that we have supported Taiwan at this point. So technically, the stance is no longer uniformly that the US supports a one China policy. It has been filtered through the function of us conditionally supporting Taiwan and returning to a point of strategic ambiguity. What is strategic ambiguity? Is it pro-Taiwan? Is it anti-Taiwan? Is it ripping our support away from Taiwan and letting them fend for themselves? No. What it means is that we're not making our intentions clear to the actors within the region. Let's continue.
So, Shawn,
All right, so let me use a
hypothetical. Right now,
if I
the
may.
U.S.'s position is a one China policy. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. At what point, for example, if Russia wanted to put nuclear weapons 90 miles south of our border in Cuba, we did have a Cuban Missile Crisis, what would your posture be there? In other words, if you're saying as long as Taiwan provides the semiconductor chips, we'll help them, but after that, they're on their own?
But after that, they're on their own? Wait, Shawn, hold on. But after that, they're on their own is not the same thing as strategic ambiguity. Strategic ambiguity, to remind you, Shawn, is that the US doesn't make their intended actions clear to the actors within the region. Which means if, let's say, China attacks Taiwan, it doesn't mean that the US is in support of China attacking Taiwan. What it means is that the region itself, both Taiwan and China, don't know how the US would respond to such an action. The point is to keep all players in the region unsure, is to not do anything that would overly shift the status quo. We're not really talking about the ethics of the position itself. There's a lot of people that think strategic ambiguity is a horrible concept and that doesn't have a lot of systematic evidence to back it up. That's not what we're discussing. We're talking about what Vivek is actually saying and how you are interpreting his statements.
Actually, Shawn, and that's again how my position's been caricatured. I will remind you and everybody else that right now the United States...
I'm listening.
That is what he seems to be saying to people who aren't able to follow the nuance like you, Shawn. But in fact, when you break it down and you understand what strategic ambiguity is and what all of these different components represent, that isn't what he's saying.
No, it's not what I'm saying because, well, I'll give it to you very simply. Right now, the
Vivek, I'm afraid when it comes to people like Shawn Hannity, you can never provide it simply enough.
United States' policy towards Taiwan is a one China policy. Donald Trump was derided. He was made fun of for daring to pick up a phone call from the Taiwanese president. The United States of America right now does not even recognize Taiwan as a nation. I view it differently. I am clear that we will defend Taiwan. I'm the only politician in either party that has
until we get our semiconductors under control.
In 2028.
And then
and I understand where David is coming from on this and why he's sort of twisting this position in the way that he is. It's because David isn't viewing our conditional support for Taiwan as taking one state of strategic ambiguity and fundamentally changing it on the other end, right? If we have a one China policy right now, and then we end up conditionally supporting Taiwan for however long that might be, and for whatever reason it might be contingent upon, in this case, semiconductor independence, even though we are returning to the exact same position of strategic ambiguity on the other side, that temporary period of conditional support fundamentally changes the relationship between the United States and Taiwan, at least by any reasonable interpretation of what would be happening. Because in that period of conditional support, you have opened up channels of communication. And so that on its own impacts the dynamics of the region. Again, not a foreign policy expert, really don't know shit about this topic and what would be a good decision in these kinds of quagmires. What I am very good at is listening to what people are saying, understanding the language that they're using, and determining whether people come along and are either ignorantly misinterpreting that language or are deliberately misinterpreting that language. And with these guys, Hannity and David Pakman, I can't tell which is which at this point. I don't know.
I would resume the current position of the United States after we've achieved semiconductor independence.
Okay, so it's basically what Hannity is saying. You know, this is the thing we learned through my interview and others with
Nope, not what Hannity is saying at all.
Vivek. You can give him a quote out of a book he wrote.
Quotation,
and
not
he
a
will
quote.
somehow slip around it and say, well, but, you know, the media and partisanship and misquoting and lack of context and whatever. Hannity confronted Vivek with another one, saying, you said aid to Israel should end in 2028. And Vivek says, that's false. And Hannity goes, here's a quote. I've got the quote. When you are putting Hannity in this position, you know you're not making much
now
sense.
let's check this out. Some of the issues, this is important too.
You know, you said aid to Israel, our number one ally, only democracy in the region, should end in 2028, and that they should be integrated with their neighbors. I have an exact quote. You want me to read it?
That's actually...
I wish he had Shawn read the direct quotation here.
Yeah, I can tell you the exact quote. What I said is it would be a mark of success if we ever got to a point in our relationship with Israel if Israel never needed the United States' aid.
Okay. Now, obviously, Vivek isn't going to be able to directly quote himself. That would be ridiculous. So, I have done the courtesy of pulling up a number of articles that have been written in the interim and picking out the various quotations that he has made on the subject that the mainstream media is currently trying to pick apart. Yeah, let's take a look. If we're successful, the true mark of success for the US and for Israel will be to get to a 2028 where Israel is so strongly standing on its own 2 feet, integrated into the economic and security infrastructure of the rest of the Middle East, that it will not require and be dependent on that same level of historical aid or commitment from the US, Ramaswamy told the Washington Free Beacon on Saturday. Notice how in this quotation, he isn't saying that they will pull out aid from Israel. He's saying that it would be ideal, it would be a true mark of success for US and for Israel in order to reach that point. I think people like Shawn Hannity, Nikki Haley, they're having a difficult time understanding the concept of a conditional statement. It's not saying that we will do this, it's saying that we will do this if something else happens. A little bit tricky here, but you know, we can piece it together. Here's another quotation, just in case you want a little more context. Come 2028, that additional aid won't be necessary in order to still have the kind of stability that we'd actually have in the Middle East by having Israel more integrated in with its partners. So this is sort of an expansion on the previous statement that he made, the previous conditional statement. If we're successful, if we get to the point that we want to, then the additional aid won't be necessary. Okay, so the quotations build on each other. Okay, let's return to the interview. And there's a specific line that is brought up here that is just
Shawn, you know how
ridiculous.
politics is played. A lot of the other professional politicians who have been threatened by my rise have used that statement to say that I would cut off aid to Israel.
All right, now whatever you think about aid to Israel.
Now Vivek has actually clarified his position within the last couple of days. Because he's gotten so much heat from this, he's talked about how we're not actually going to cut aid from Israel without the explicit consent from Israel. That makes sense. That's a responsible policy. But again, it makes it seem as if he's flip-flopping, even though he's remained fairly consistent throughout this entire issue, because he's had to constantly respond to all of these criticisms that are slightly twisting his language and taking him out of context.
That's not what this is about. This is about the fact that Vivek Ramaswamy, with a straight face and very articulately, right? You got to give the guy credit for it. He
Very
will just
articulate.
straight up say, no, never said it. You've got the quotes. He doesn't care. He'll go on.
The problem that we're having here, David, is that he might have said something very similar, very closely related to what he is being accused of. But there is subtle yet important differentiation in what he is being accused of saying and what he actually said.
He'll go on to something tangential. Hannity goes back and says, well, you said Israel shouldn't have preferential treatment. That's a quote. And he goes, well, those are direct quotes from the fake news media. Well,
Here we go.
Are they direct quotes or not, Vivek?
Traveled to Israel. I have business partners in Israel. The reality is this. By the end of my first term, our relationship with Israel will be stronger than it ever has been because I will treat it as a true friendship, not just a transactional relationship.
And why did you say
I
that
wanna
they shouldn't have
negotiate
preferential
Abraham.
treatment?
And here we
Why
go.
did you say that Israel should not have
I did not-
preferential treatment from us? That's a direct quote.
Shawn, I understand. No, those are direct quotes from headlines.
Preferential treatment. The specific words that Shawn Hannity used actually comes from an article, I see it from the Jewish Chronicle, that says Israel shouldn't get special treatment, says US presidential candidate. So the term special treatment was used in the headline of the article. If you go down to the quotations, the quotation that is being referenced here, I'll read this quotation. There's no North Star commitment to any one country other than the United States of America, he said when asked about aid to Israel. This one's a little bit more clear as to how we got from that quotation to him being accused of saying that we don't provide other countries special treatment. The connection is at least here. Once again, though, Shawn Hannity tried to make it seem as if the words preferential treatment came out of Vivek's mouth. And that's what's disingenuous. Because he said it was a direct quote. Well, a direct quotation. That's what he meant to say. By the way, if people are confused as to why I keep making all of these quotation corrections, I make this mistake all the time, but I'm feeling petty today. To quote is the verb form. Quotation is the noun. Let's continue.
Opposition research fed to the fake news media.
So are they direct quotes or not? It's a very specific kind of direct quote.
The reality is, here's what I've said, is Abraham Accords 2.0 is my top priority. Abraham Accords 2.0 is my top priority, which is to get Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar into that pact with Israel. And foremost, to have a partnership with Israel that does something really important for the U.S., which is to make sure that Iran never, ever, ever has nuclear capabilities. That's important to the United States.
Notice that he's moved on to something different here. And
he is moving on to a quotation that actually also existed in one of these articles. Pretty sure the topic that he just addressed was in the same article that I brought up. Yep, it says in this article. The headline of the article is Israel shouldn't get special treatment, says U.S. presidential candidate. And then there's a quotation down here below the part where he says on Russell Brand's show, there's no North Star commitment to any one country other than the United States of America. He also said, I want to go even further than Trump on the Abraham Accords. As president, I want to achieve the Abraham Accords 2.0 and bring in Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, and Indonesia. He said it would be good for everyone. So it's not completely off topic, David. He actually references the exact quotation that operated in continuity within the article that Shawn Hannity referenced.
He really is very slick. You got to give the guy credit.
And the other thing I've said, Shawn, is that Israel's our friend. Good friends learn from each other. I would love Israel's border policies in this country. I would love Israel's tough on crime policies and strong national identity in this country. I would love an iron dome like Israel has to defend itself against Hamas, which is a good thing for Israel. I want something like that here in the United States. So I don't read from the traditional GOP talk.
All right, so he just goes on to filibuster more. And then just one more clip here. In this one, Ramaswamy says, our actions might be actually pushing Russia closer to China. And I have to tell you, Hannity rightly points out, no, but that's already something that is happening. It's not about our Ukraine policy.
Shawn, there's also a deeper point, which is that I worry we are now driving Russia closer into China's arms. And the Russia-China alliance is the single greatest threat that we face. And that's what I really worry about.
It's
and
already
I think that
there.
if there's an
it's
opportunity,
Russia, China, and Iran.
Well,
a new
exactly.
axis of evil is formed. So the question is, I
want to weaken it. And I want to weaken it
too. And I'd love to see that happen.
Yes.
Yeah, and Vivek has said that he would, I guess, weaken it by giving parts of Ukraine to Putin and then going and visiting Putin. So this is less about the issues.
And that's just a hilarious straw man that sort of represents how David Pakman is interacting with Vivek and is contending with Vivek's positions. I don't know. When I criticize people, I try to be as scrupulous with my criticism as I can be. I try to reference exactly what the person said to the degree where whoever I'm accusing of something would at least agree that I am accurately representing their position. Once again, just so that we're crystal clear, I am not talking about the merits of these various foreign policy positions. I don't know what will work. I don't know what won't work. As I mentioned in a previous video, my intuition is some dude who doesn't have a shred of foreign policy experience might not know the best approach to the region. That's an intuition. Then again, Vivek's argument is these people have fucked up so many times, how can we still trust them? These are the same people who got us into Iraq and Afghanistan in the first place. These are the neocon war hawks. And people on the progressive left might point out, well, Vivek has also had some particularly hawkish sentiments regarding the drug cartels in Mexico. So the idea that he's somehow some purely pro-American anti-war candidate is ridiculous. I have no idea how his seemingly aggressive stance toward the cartels would turn out. What I care about more, though, it's not about whether I agree with this policy or that policy. It's about whether we are actually accurately depicting what people are saying. If we're not doing that, then the whole media cycle is fucked. Anyway, this video just highly irritated me. And I think you can sense my irritation. And I'm ready for it to be over. I will see you guys in the next one.